So today we're looking at the top 10 questions people who are looking for a personal injury lawyer might have. So number one, do I have a case? Okay, do you have a case? That's going to depend on a lot of things, and specifically the type of case that you've got. So if it's a car wreck case and it's a disputed liability situation, it might depend on some rules of the road, might depend on what the witnesses say. If it's a medical malpractice case, it might depend on whether the standard of care was breached. For example, whether the bad outcome that occurred was actually the result of negligence or just maybe a risk of the procedure. And just because you had a bad outcome doesn't mean that you can sue a medical provider for that, right? You have to show there was a breach of the standard of care. So whether you have a case is going to depend on the elements of that case, and negligence cases, injury cases are pretty much all the same in that you have to prove a duty was breached and that specific breach of that duty caused you damages that would not have otherwise occurred. So in a car wreck case, a major defense will be that the plaintiff had a pre-existing injury, that the injury they're claiming occurred in the car wreck was already there. That would be a causation defense, arguing that, yeah, maybe we ran the red light and hit you, but didn't make anything worse because you already had this injury. So, whether you have a case is tough to say based, just at a high level, but those are some of the issues that you will get into in terms of whether you have a case. Number two, how much is my case worth? Okay, so this depends on a lot of things. Generally speaking, if we're talking about pre-suit settlements and trying to get your case moved quickly, the way that an insurance company will look at this, and of course they're the ones ultimately paying most of the time, is they'll say, well, what are your medical bills? What are your hard economic damages, your out-of-pocket costs, your medical costs, lost wages? Anything that you can do that is a sort of quantifiable economic number that you can attribute to the accident, the injury, or whatever happened. So the insurance company will take that number and they will multiply it by some number, whether that's 1, 2, 3 times, to try to approximate the pain, suffering, discomfort, annoyance, loss of enjoyment of life, all of the non-economic damages that we would argue for at a trial. They're just going to use some strict multiplier to approximate that pre-suit. So if you've got, let's say, $20,000 of hard economic bills or medical bills, an insurance company might offer 40 2 times or 60 3 times in a sort of conventional kind of car wreck case. There are some cases, though, back to how much your case is worth, where that really doesn't make any sense. For example, if a teacher at a school assaults a child and the medical bills are $200. It's not like, well, okay, 3 times the medical bills, $600, that's going to be enough to compensate that claim. No. So there are certain cases, certain kinds of cases where the misconduct is so bad, but the relative economic impact may not be so bad, right? You won't be able to quantify that kind of assault case, what's that worth in sort of hard economic terms, but it's still a significant case when it comes to the harm that it does. And so this kind of multiplier thing doesn't work. So what is your case worth? It depends a lot on the type of case that you've got. It also depends on where your case is, because there might be damages caps that apply. I'm licensed in Tennessee. We have damages caps, so $750,000 in most cases is the limit on pain and suffering. But I'm licensed in Kentucky too, and there are no damages caps. So in those states, you have more of an upside when you go to trial. It's not fair, but that is the law. And number 3, what will it cost me? Well, hopefully it will cost you nothing until you win. And I just did a video on how personal injury lawyers get paid, but basically it's a contingency fee, meaning we only get paid if you win, if we recover something for you, and then there's an attorney's fee. And what that means is if you don't win, you don't owe anything. So it doesn't cost you anything up front, and if an attorney tries to make you provide a cash retainer up front in an injury case, that's a red flag, and don't do it. Number 4, who will handle my case? There's a lot of concern on these forums that I've seen that real attorneys are not actually handling the work, and that it's a very paralegal heavy model where paralegals do all the work, and it's a little bit like going to the dentist. You go to the dentist, and the hygienist is the one cleaning your teeth and doing almost everything. And then the dentist with the degree on the wall comes in at the end for maybe like a minute and looks at your teeth. Some law firms operate on that kind of model. Our firm, for example, is different. If you call us, you will talk to an attorney. We have no paralegal staff. It's all done by lawyers, and we scale up with various technology and vendors that we use, but an attorney is going to be on your case. An attorney is going to be talking to you. That goes to the next thing, which is communication and updates. This is the number one thing when someone has hired a big TV lawyer and feels they've made a mistake and calls us and says, I made a mistake, I want to fire them, I want to go with you. This is why. It's because of communication and updates and not feeling like they can get a lawyer on the phone. If they call the firm or they send an email, no one responds, or it's just taking another message and passing it down. Sometimes it's just, they don't even know who the lawyer is on the case. There's been so many lawyers because some of these firms have like a pipeline of attorneys as your case goes, from intake to pre-suit negotiations to litigation, is all these changing parts. And that can be overwhelming for people. So that is one of the number one things I think people are concerned about, is being able to reach their lawyer, talk to their lawyer, get them on the phone. And so that's an important thing to think about when you're considering a personal injury law firm. Number 5, what experience do you have with cases like mine? This is a very important question because the law is a little bit like medicine in the sense that, if you've got a heart problem, you go to a cardiologist. You don't go to a foot doctor, right? Everything is specialized. And that is the case in law. So you can't really hire a criminal defense lawyer to bring a medical malpractice case. You really can't hire a car wreck lawyer to bring a medical malpractice case, at least in Tennessee. I mean, there is such a specialization that goes on in terms of knowing the laws and the ins and outs of expert proof. So you really do want, if you have a specific kind of case, if it's medical malpractice, if it's a generalized personal injury, you want someone who really does focus on that. So the jack of all trades, master of none is probably not the best thing. The second thing I'll say is you will see on every law firm webpage some big number of, we got this verdict, or we've recovered this much money, billions of dollars. And that doesn't really tell you anything about how they did in a particular case and whether they did better for the client than someone else would have done. What I mean is some of our, what I would call best victories, have been when we added value and we took a case that on paper seemed to be worth some number and we got much more. And that's not because we got a big verdict at trial necessarily. It might be because we did a really good investigation. We subpoenaed 911 records and we found a key witness who was supportive of our case. And we take a case from basically like disputed liability to slam dunk policy limits. So, I mean, that's what you're kind of looking for, is a law firm that knows how to maximize the value of your case. So don't hire the jack of all trades, and don't be impressed by big numbers. They don't really tell you how they're going to add value in your case. Next question, what is the process and timeline? So depends on the kind of case and whether you're pre-suit or whether you filed your case. I could say safely, it's going to be 6 months to a year, right? If you hire us or hire probably anyone, then the fastest we could probably turn your case around, get it investigated, get all your medical records, send a demand to the insurance company, is probably 6 months to a year. And that could be for a lot of reasons, right? Getting the records sometimes is out of our control. Whether you're still treating, going to doctor's appointments, also out of our control. Whether there's some sort of accident report that's maybe not available because there's a criminal investigation that's slowing things down. I mean, all these sorts of factors. So that's why it takes so long. If you file a lawsuit, say you go through the pre-suit negotiation, you can't make a deal at that stage, you file the suit, now you're talking 12 to 24 months. And the reason is you're going to go through something called discovery, which I've got a video on explaining that, and you're probably going to have to give a deposition. And so that process can take, 6-10 months on its own, and then you might have more litigation after that. So, just kind of depends on whether you can get your case settled pre-suit or not. Anywhere from earliest 6 months, probably 2 years if you're going to go from, litigating it all the way. It can be longer than that if you have trial and appeals. Okay, number 7, will my case go to trial or settle? There was literally an article in the Tennessee Bar Journal yesterday talking about this. Only 3% of cases filed in the state of Tennessee go to trial. Whether they settle, I don't know. Those numbers are unavailable, but they will either settle or be resolved some other way, either through dismissal or summary judgment. But there's basically a 97% chance that your injury case will not go to trial. So it's a little bit higher in medical malpractice cases, but again, not much. I mean, we're talking about 95, 94% of cases don't go to trial. So, you can pretty much bank on your case will not be going to trial in all probability. Okay, last question. What is your role as the client in a personal injury case? So this depends a lot on whether your case gets filed. Because if it's just a matter of a pre-suit car wreck case where you're just getting medical records and sending a demand and taking a settlement, then your role could be very limited. If you don't want to have any involvement in getting your medical records, for example, we could handle all that for you and get them. And basically, we would just have some conversations about the treatment that you've gotten, the impact that the accident had on you, come up with a demand package. Got a whole video on that if you don't know what that is, but basically sending a demand letter to the insurance company, demanding payment, and then you're done. So it's really not a whole lot of involvement if that's the path that you go down. If your case is filed, you'll have to go through something called discovery, and I have a video on that, but that is basically providing information to the other side, sitting for a deposition where they can ask you questions under oath. That's a big moment in your lawsuit, one of the biggest days in your case, so a day you definitely want to prepare for and do your best on. So if you're interested in watching a video about red flags when hiring personal injury lawyers, watch this next video.